What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA Show, powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/All-NBA. I'm your host, Adam Mares. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Tim Legler. Legs, a couple good games to talk about in the association last night. How are you doing today?
Yeah, full slate, as it always is on that particular day. I'm celebrating Martin Luther King Jr., starting early, too, on a Monday. So we had games running all day long. Some of them actually pretty competitive games. Matchups on paper weren't necessarily the best, but I think we got some good ones to talk about.
It fits my schedule well when they start the games all day, because I almost never watch these live. I almost always watch them talking about the Celtics. They're coming in with a level of confidence and swagger about them, and it's the exact opposite of what we have right now. So yeah, it was talking about the previous era of the Warriors. Obviously great memories, but definitely feels like a long time ago. Kevon Looney said almost the exact same thing, by the way, and I don't think they were sitting next to each other. So it's a sentiment the team feels of, yeah, that championship team, we're not that. That's so far ago. We're a team that's not really going anywhere. Did you interpret that the same way? And do you interpret a 40-point loss as, hey, in the middle of a season, this isn't working, and the team is not, they're not going in a direction that's going to work out for them?
Yeah, listen, man, it's gotten full-blown ugly offensively for the Warriors, and who would have thought we'd ever say that about the Golden State Warriors with the run they've had in the Steph Curry era and being one of the hardest teams to defend year after year, typically, to hit rock bottom like this. I mean, this is obviously a 40-point loss is one thing. Scoring 85 points, okay, that's another issue, but that could be a one-off on a given night. Adam, the problem is they have scored fewer than 100 points 10 times in their last 22 games. 10 times. It's hard to score less than 100 points in the NBA the way it's set up, with the amount of freedom given to three-point shooters, the pace of the game, the lack of physicality relative to how it used to be. They've legislated a lot of that out of the game. It's not very difficult to get to 100, and they have failed to do that 10 times in 22 games. That's almost half of their games, all of which one have been a loss, by the way. So, and when I just did a game, Golden State, Minnesota last week, and we talked to Steve Kerr before the game about this. And then my first question to him, your offense, to talk to me about the struggles with your offense, what's going on? He basically said their problems, and look, right now you don't have Kuminga, you don't have Podziemski. So, that hurts. But, even those guys, Podziemski only has so much value offensively, and Kuminga is still streaky, but still, yeah, he's probably, your second or third most accomplished offensive player. So it's important not having them. Doesn't explain this. Basically, Kerr said their spacing with their lack of shooting out of their front court positions is a big problem because of the way teams are just hanging back in the paint against whoever it may be. Trace Jackson Davis, Kevon Looney, Draymond when he plays the 5. Even if Draymond makes a couple of shots, no one runs out there and overreacts to that. They're hanging back in the lane. They're playing topside on Curry, forcing him to cut back into the lane. There's no space in there. There's no driving space in there for him because of where the bigs of the opponents are lining up against them. And he really alluded to that, and made me think about the internal conversations that are probably going on there organizationally about what the trading deadline could represent for them. Now, I don't know what they're willing to do. I don't know what the price tag of a shooting big would be. But there are some out there that, their names come up, and you wonder if Golden State's going to make a move in that direction, because it was like very definitive and clear when I asked Steve Kerr. Most coaches will say it's a combination of things.
Yeah.
And he went right to it, Adam. I mean, he went right to it. Our lack of spacing and shooting and stretchability out of our 5 position is a major problem. I mean, he couldn't have been more specific about it. And, this is another example. Now, look, when you add it up, when you're also having offensive issues while at the same time playing one of the best teams in the league, well, you end up with a 40-point loss. And that's what happened to Golden State last night. But this is an issue now that just isn't like one night. They had a this has been going on. That's a long stretch. 22 games. Yeah. And that's like 7 weeks, and they've scored under 110 times.
Yeah.
So it's not winnable. It's just not tenable in the NBA to have this kind of anemic offense, and they're gonna probably do everything they can to address it here before the deadline.
And they got Sacramento coming up, who's been red hot, by the way, on Wednesday. Kind of a rivalry game. That's a team that they've had their number, just historically the last handful of years. Steph Curry, after the game, he was so dejected, and he said this upcoming stretch without Draymond will make or break the season to keep it real. To be honest, to keep it real with you. That tells you where their head is at. He really believes, like, if they don't perform well over these next 4 or 5 games, that the season is over. That's what he's telling you. So we're only halfway through the season. A great team like the Golden State Warriors are in peril. And the quotes coming out of the locker room yesterday were just kind of, of a team dejected and kind of knows what the situation is.
Well, listen, here's the thing real quick. One last point on this. So when we talked to Kerr that night, and one of the things they said was, look, they were finishing up a long road trip in Minnesota, and they were leaving that night to go back to California with 8 out of 9 at home. And that, you're basically a 500 team with 8 out of 9 at home. That is your only chance you're really going to have to close that gap. You're 11th right now in the Western Conference. Now, the good news is they're like, 3 games or something out of 5th. So they're bunched together in the West.
Are they still there?
Well, I don't know now. Going
yeah.
into that night, they were. This was last Wednesday.
Yeah.
So I don't know where they're at now. I mean, they beat Washington since then and lost to
You're
Boston.
Right.
So
2 games,
it's got to be
actually.
close to that.
Crazy.
Okay, yeah, I didn't look it up today, but that's what that night. It was actually 2.5 games going into the Minnesota game, and they won that game. So here's the thing: you start off, you get Washington at home as you're supposed to. You win that first game. That's a nice treat, by the way, coming off that road trip to get Washington as your first game at home. But then you get Boston, tough one. Now at Sac is your one road game. After that, you got a home stretch: Chicago, the Lakers, Utah, Oklahoma City, very very tough. Phoenix, Orlando. I mean, those are all very winnable games. If you don't want to consider maybe Oklahoma City as a winnable game, okay, because of who they are, but you're still at home. Those other games are none of those teams are contending for a title this year. Like you've got to take care of your business. So to Draymond's point, it is like it got late early out here, and the time is now. They're going to have to make a move during this homestand, and that, by the way, practically takes you right up to the trading deadline.
Well, speaking of getting late early, tonight there are 2 nationally televised games on TNT. The Knicks versus the Nets and the Nuggets versus the Sixers without their star players. This is one of the things about I'm just curious. You were in broadcasting. You call the games obviously on the other network, but the NBA has to figure out a way to flex games. This is my big take. Those are 2 horrible games. This is a marquee day in the NBA. You want to highlight things going on. College football's over. And these 2 games are no hopers. Even if you somehow randomly happen to get a good game, it's still not enticing from storylines and this or that. So I don't know how you feel about this, but it feels like the NBA and the league partners can kind of look around the corner and say, we can't do this. We can't have Knicks Nets when the Nets cannot field a competitive team, or the Sixers are so shorthanded they can't field a competitive team. That's 4.5 hours of horrible basketball tonight on the national stage.
Yeah, 4.5 hours. If you're lucky, it could be 5. Depending how long the games go. All right, but here's the thing, and it just so happens this is probably not a great example today because, all right, buddy, you ready? Here are your options. You want to flex out?
Oh no.
How about Knicks Nets? I'm sorry. How about Blazers Heat? Heat. Does that do it for you? How about
there you go.
How about Wizards Lakers? How's that feel? Yeah. Or how about Magic Raptors?
I'll take that one. I'll take it. That's the best game of the night.
That's all you got. So, I hear what you're saying. And look, I do think, and look, I know for me, for example, I have a pretty good idea what my remaining regular season game broadcast schedule looks like. Yeah. And there's at least 3 of those out of the, I think it's 14 I have down on paper. At least 3 of those I'm praying get flexed. Because there's just not going to be a lot of interest in the game. So we'll see what, it's above my pay grade. I don't know what the capability is for the league, the networks. Like, I don't know what all goes in to those decisions, but you're 100% right. It's a shame. College football's over. You got a few days here before the conference championship games in the NFL. So you got some chance here this week to really get some eyeballs on the NBA leading into a big football weekend. And that's unfortunately not great action we're going to be scheduling tonight.
Well, perhaps not great action. 2 participants in the dunk contest have been announced. The dunk contest has long been dead, but it's still interesting to try to think about who could show up. It has evolved over the years. Maybe at best it's a showcase for young up-and-coming talent. And we kind of get that with Buzelis out of Chicago and Castle out of San Antonio have participated in it. Look, both of those players 3-4 years from now can be big names. Like they're young prospects that have some upside. We haven't seen a ton from them just yet. So this could be a thing where there might not be a ton of hype around it right now, but 3-4 years from now, you look back and are like, hey man, these guys have broken out. They were in the dunk contest, what have you. So I actually am somewhat excited about this, but my question to you is, are you excited to see those 2 guys in the dunk contest? And who would you also like to see participate? There's 2 more spots open.
I'm even more interested in Buzelis than Castle, to be honest with you. One of the things that I really liked about Buzelis as I was preparing for the draft and just kind of evaluating guys and watching a ton of film was he's got crazy bouncy legs. And in his game action leading into the draft, when you watch him, he tries to dunk on everybody. So I'm imagining he's going to have some really creative stuff. Because guys like that are that bouncy, and he's probably been bouncy like that, since he was 14. Like they spend a lot of time in the gym after practice when you got bouncy legs doing all kinds of stuff, thinking one day, hey man, if I'm in the dunk contest, so I guarantee you Buzelis has some stuff. Castle was a little bit surprising. I know he's a good athlete, and I really like his upside as a player. I think he's going to be a great player in this league. I didn't know, what kind of trickiness he would bring to it, because you got to have some flair, and he doesn't come off to me as a flair kind of guy, but Buzelis
he dunks on people though. He attacks guys, like he does go for the posters, but that's not necessarily.
He does, but he looks like he's all business, which is a good thing for the Spurs. I mean, it's a good thing, and I like the players like that. Buzelis, he looks like a guy that wants to go out there and have some fun with that. He even wore I think he even wore like a wild suit the night of the draft. Like he's a guy that you look at and say, yeah, he's been waiting for this moment for several years. I guarantee you. Curious to see who else joins him. Maybe we're at the point where you just ask rookies. You know what I mean? Do you make it even part of your rookie contract? Like it's mandated that if you're healthy, you have to participate in dunk contest if asked by the league. I don't know, because obviously a lot of the veteran guys don't want to do it. And that's why the dunk contest has lost its luster, because you don't have guys that are, all-star caliber players typically involved. These are 2 young, interesting rookies, both, I think, headed for really good long careers in the NBA. So yeah, sign me up for that. I'm into it. I'd like to see them recruit at least one of the Thompson brothers, if not, both. That might be fun to get both of them. Amen and Ausar Thompson, right? That'd be kind of cool. And by the way, they battled last night. We're about to talk about that. But that might be kind of fun, right? To add a little extra to the event, get some people to tune in. You got twins going at it in the All-Star game.
Yeah. I think everybody wants, I like your idea of forcing players to do it. The Players Association would never do it, but we got to get to the point where the fans get what they want at the All-Star game. And so that would be one, but I agree with you, man. Amen Thompson, Ausar Thompson, get them both in there. Brother versus brother would be a great final. They're both insane athletes. I can imagine they put something creative together. And again, I think it has evolved to a showcase for young players. Thompson twins, Castle, Buzelis, really good chance that those guys are stars, or at least very well known, and this could be the thing that kind of launches them into the public domain.
And I actually real quick, I have an idea too. If the Thompson brothers, you do recruit them to be in it. Each of them, they always have gimmicks, and they bringing out people from the stands and whoever. Each of them bring a family member out to throw them a lob. So now you create a real family dynamic, man. Like in the house, like who threw a better lob pass, who stood still better so they could jump over them. I think we're onto something.
I think we're onto it, man. Let's go into this first game, though. We're going to talk about Hawks-Knicks first. The Knicks get the win 119-110. What I like about this game is this, from the setup standpoint, is if you look at the standings, these teams have a chance to go up against each other in the playoffs. Just trying to project forward where they be, very realistic. This is a 6-3 matchup. And in this one, the Hawks finished the first half really strong, took an 8-point lead. DeAndre Hunter had it going for a lot of the game, but Mikal Bridges was phenomenal. 26 points, 12 of 17 shooting, and he had some big-time plays, like made shots or created shots in key moments in this one. What stood out to you about this, and how did the Knicks get the win?
I think one of the things that stood out to me, Bridges was great in this game, but I also thought they had really timely contributions from their role players that, to me, made the Knicks look a little deeper and more balanced than I typically think they are. I thought Cameron Payne came in and played very well for them. Deuce McBride played very well for them. Josh Hart did his normal Josh Hart type stuff, some of that hard hat stuff. But I felt like they had guys step up at key times. And they were important runs when they had reserves on the court that to me just made the Knicks look a little bit different than a given night when their starting five is going to bring it. Brunson and Towns are typically going to be really good. And then, Bridges has been very, very good, but, you're just hoping it's either Bridges or Anunoby or Hart, like one of those guys. And then you don't really know at all about the bench. But I felt like, and even Precious Achiuwa, I thought gave them really hard, solid minutes, very competitive minutes. So I thought their bench was a very important factor in this game. It might not have been massive production, but they were making the right plays and they were out there during runs that had to be made. So that, to me, is what I think impressed me the most about the Knicks in this one.
And some of the reason for that was foul trouble, right? In the first half, the Hawks, the whistle went away from them. Not saying it was bad calls or this or that, but they had a handful of guys, Hart, McBride, in foul trouble. And so it forced them to go a little bit deeper into the rotation and play those guys a little bit longer. But to your point, they stepped up and looked pretty good. If I ask you about the Hawks, what do you think of, do you have a take on Vit Krejci? Because I thought in the first half of this game, he did some things that were pretty impressive to me. And he's a guy I've watched a few times and thought, okay, there's something, he has a play here or there. But did he stand out to you at all the way he did to me, especially in that second quarter?
He absolutely did. And one of the things that I didn't realize, like he's got really good feel for vision and touch and getting the ball quickly to the next spot. There was a transition play that stood out to me in particular where I think it was Trae Young advanced the ball to him in a semi-break situation. It wasn't like big numbers, but maybe they had one-man advantage. He was running the right wing, and Trae Young threw the ball across the court ahead to him. So from the backcourt on the left side, across midcourt line, he was running the right wing, and he just threw a touch pass to Jalen Johnson running down the middle of the floor. And it was just so pretty because it looked like he was going to try to catch it. I don't know. It might have been Brunson. Somebody was sort of back about to guard him. I thought he was going to put his head down and try to take it into his chest and get to the rim, which probably would have been a good play too. But instead, like as the ball was in the air, like you could already see him dissecting how this was playing out. So that Jalen Johnson was running down the middle of the floor and he threw a beautiful just touch pass. Hardly had his hands on it. Right back to the middle to Jalen Johnson, who was streaking for a big dunk. Very big momentum play in the game. It's one of those energizing type plays. And I was like, man, that showed me a lot. He's got a very good feel for the game, super competitive. And it looks to me like he's got the trust of his coaching staff and the higher name players on his roster.
By the way, Jalen Johnson, another guy I would like to see in the dunk contest. The dunk you're talking about down the lane kind of caught me off guard. Not because I thought it was going to be a dunk, but because of how high he got. Like he was up dunking it down into the rim, almost like he was pushing the ball down. That guy has some guys are power dunkers, whatever. He does it so easy. It looks like he's at 50% speed and all of a sudden his elbow's at the rim. So he's another guy I could throw into there. Any other notes or thoughts on the Knicks on this one?
One of the things that was kind of interesting about this game, and I can't find it for some reason. I thought it was in the play-by-play of the box score. I don't know where it is. There were a lot of technicals in this game. This game had a lot of jawing with the officials. It was nonstop. And I don't know how many texts were called. I'm going to say 5 at least. But it's interesting because they weren't really directed at each other. Like normally you get a game of 5, 6 texts. Well, probably there's a couple of those are double texts, right? Guys are jawing at each other. This was all players going at officials. It felt like it was the entire game. It was a physical game. I did think there were guys getting hit, a contact on drives. They weren't getting calls. Look, this is a good win for the Knicks. And, if you'd have asked me, 6 weeks ago, would I consider that like a quality win against Atlanta at home? I probably would have said no, but Atlanta's playing pretty good basketball, man. And they've got a young team, lively legs, and they look like they've got really good chemistry. Some of the best chemistry I think they've had since Trae Young's been there, honestly. And as a result, this is a good win for the Knicks. It was a close game throughout. The Knicks made the plays down the stretch. Their bench their bench played very well for them. And the Hawks, I thought, played well, and the Knicks were still able to hold them off and get a comfortable lead, really pulled away late, because it doesn't, a 9-point game, this really didn't feel like a 9-point game.
Right. All right, let's take our first break. On the other side, there's more games for us to get to, including Pistons, Rockets, Grizzlies, Wolves, and some news on Donte DiVincenzo that I think is going to texture the story around the Timberwolves for the back half or for this upcoming stretch, but perhaps even beyond that. We'll get to that on the other side. First, let's talk about FanDuel. You guys know it. The playoffs are here. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. Just visit FanDuel.com/AllNBA, all one word, All NBA, to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/AllNBA. Make this playoffs season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in D.C. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Also want to tell you guys about Shady Rays. You can get ready for the season ahead with Shady Rays. They have quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all your outdoor adventures, including skiing, hiking. I have some in the car, because I always wear sunglasses when I'm driving, especially out here, snow on the ground in Denver. You got to have those sunglasses on so you're not blinded. And they have hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find a pair that match your style. And they probably have a style in your favorite team's colors. So exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving their best deal of the season when you head to shadyrays.com. And here's the key. Use our promo code to get 35% off. That's AC35 for 35% off polarized sunglasses. AC35. Try for yourself the shades that are rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. All right, back here, segment 2 of the All NBA show with myself and Tim Legler. Make sure you hit that like button, help us grow the show. Easiest thing you can do to help us out. And if you're new to the show, hit the subscribe button. We got good stuff. Maybe a big name guest coming up later in the week that I'm pretty excited about. I think you guys will all enjoy, so you're going to want to stay locked to the channel. The next game, the Pistons get the big win in Houston over the Rockets, 107-96. The Pistons won despite 23 turnovers as a team and 10 from Cade Cunningham. How did they do it, Legs?
Outworked them. And if you watch this game, you rarely see the Houston Rockets playing a game when you say anybody outworked them. That's part of their MO, their identity. You can just look at the look on Ime Udoka's face most of the time. It explains why they play the way they play. He's no nonsense with those guys. And I felt like Detroit beat them to the spot. They beat them to loose balls. They were more physical from start to finish. And one thing about Detroit now, they have a lot of confidence. They now understand, this is a team that's probably going to finish somewhere around 500 or better. And that means they're going to be in the mix. They're going to be a play-in team in the Eastern Conference if they do that. So now they're carrying themselves differently. Their best player, Cade Cunningham, has emerged as a legitimate, future star in this league. He leads them every single night as their main guy, scorer, production. So they walk out on the court with swagger because they have him. And then they've got a bunch of young guys that are all finding who they are in this league. It's one of the youngest rosters. It might be the youngest. I'm not even sure. I don't have the data in front of me. It's got to be one of the youngest rosters in the NBA. They did add some vets, which may have skewed that in the offseason. You bring in Tobias Harris and Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. That's going to probably change those numbers. But their main core, their main nucleus, the guys they're counting on to grow and develop, puts them as one of the youngest teams in the league. And I just felt like, that's also Houston's description. And it just felt like Detroit took it to them. Start of the game, they go in on the road, get 40 in the first quarter. So they came right out, and Houston did not establish the physicality with this team early in the game. And when you allow a team to get into that kind of rhythm on the road, a young team that's playing well, has a lot more confidence than a year ago, going to have your hands full. But I just thought it was a very workmanlike performance. I thought both teams got after it athletically because they both can. And Detroit was just better on this given night. And it's one of their signature wins of the year to win this game on the road, particularly since Houston just lost to Sacramento, and they're at home now. And that practice didn't go well, or that film session with Ime Udoka after they lost to Sacramento. Now you come home and you got Detroit coming in and you give up 40 in the first quarter. I give the Pistons a lot of credit, man. This is more about them to me than it was about Houston.
Is this an all-NBA curse? We just hyped up the Houston Rockets last week, did a big show about them, and they lose 2 in a row. Maybe this is a new thing we're going to have to keep our eye on. I don't know. I'll have to make sure we never talk Nuggets on this show. We can't jinx it, man. In all seriousness, though, 10 turnovers for Cade Cunningham. He's second in the NBA in turnovers, second in the NBA in turnovers per 36 minutes as well. So it's not just a matter of volume. How much of this is him, and something he has to clean up? And how much of this is the roster that they have? There's not a ton of creation, especially with the Ivy out. So is this a thing you're concerned about? Is it something he has to clean up, or is it a function of the roster?
No, I think he will clean it up. I think it is more of a function of the roster than anything. Clearly, you turn the ball over 10 times or you average as many turnovers as he does on a nightly basis. You got to definitely improve the margins around your decision-making. I'm sure there's some, every night he'd like to have again where you just wonder what he was looking at. But I think it's more a function of the roster. You're right. They don't have creators. They have athletes and they have guys that can attack. They have straight line dribble type guys. They don't have guys you're really that comfortable putting the ball in their hands. If he's got it off the ball and saying, oh, go ahead, take this one, I'll be on this side of the floor. So much pressure falls on him to orchestrate what they do and look organized, while also, by the way, we're going to need your 30 tonight. They need that 30 out of Cade Cunningham. So that's just a lot. He doesn't manage it as well as he will. I have a lot of faith. I think he's got a very high IQ. When I've heard him talk about his game, their team, he clearly is a guy that gets it above the shoulders. I think it's more of a function of their roster and then maybe him understanding the limitations of some of his teammates and maybe some of the balls that he tries to create something out of, or some of the offensive possessions he tries to create, he'll think better of in the future. That number clearly has to be tightened up. I'm sure they're talking about that in-house all the time. But until they get, I think, better, more complete offensive players around him to pair with him, you're going to see such a high usage rate that the turnover numbers are going to be up.
I like this Pistons team a lot. I see some people saying they're going to make the playoffs. I definitely think they're going to have a great chance at it. They're not going to get out of the play-in my opinion, so they're going to have to get through the play-in. And to me, I would pick them, but you're really talking about beating Miami in a one-off game. That we know that's tough. We know Miami is built for those one-off games. So I would pick them as well. I just think they're going to have to go the hard route. But if I'm the Pistons, you start to wonder about roster construction, and I don't know if this is the year to go all in. They have the flexibility. A lot of trades coming through the trade deadline, I think, can flow through the Pistons because they have that cap space. I think they have the opportunity to collect some assets this year and ride it out and hope you make it through the play-in and get a playoff experience. I wouldn't mortgage the future. But I would take a stab at ball handlers, at creators. There's guys like Bones Highland. Like I would go for the Bones Highland type player. You're not paying a lot of money, right? You're not making a trade that's costing you anything to acquire that. But because they so desperately need shot creation, those guys I think would have the best opportunities to succeed. So as I look at the Pistons, those are the types of players I would be looking for. Your second draft ball handle creators, because they need it, and they have some shooters, they have some spacers, they have some players that I think they would be set up to succeed.
I agree. And I think what they addressed this past offseason with JB Bickerstaff coming in and looking at their team and the disastrous season they had a year ago and some of the problems with their offense, they clearly specifically added spacers and shooters with Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley. I mean, other than Tobias Harris occasionally backing a guy into the post for that turnaround jumper, like none of those guys are creating any offense. It's catch and shoot. That's pretty much what those three guys do. They were so bad at that last year. And they're looking at the roster. They're looking at Cade Cunningham. They're looking at Jaden Ivey. They're looking at Marcus Sasser. They're looking at Ausar Thompson. They're looking even at a guy like Ron Holland, who can put it down and get into the lane. And like, that's his game. You better have some guys that can space out. So that was their first initial need, just to make them look like somewhat of a respectable basketball team with balance offensively. So they did that. Now they've got to go address the areas that you're talking about. That's their next off season, and maybe they're two off seasons away from really getting interesting, getting into the mix. That's probably what it is. But I think they got to this point faster than any of us could have expected. I said they'd be the most improved team in the league. I was thinking somewhere along the lines of, hey, maybe they win 30 games, 35 games. Like, that would have been a dramatic improvement. This team's a game over 500 over halfway through the season. I just think it's one of the really good stories in this league. And it's interesting the way Cleveland is better, not because they got rid of Jamie Bickerstaff. It's worked out well with Kenny Atkinson, but it's rare that a guy leaves a place, goes to another place, and then immediately has the kind of success that makes you appreciate what kind of a coach he is. Because I like JB a lot. I think he's a good coach. It just so happens that Kenny Atkinson is able to squeeze a little more juice out of this team than he could, but he gets to go to a place and dramatically help improve a team, and the front office gets credit too. So yeah, the Pistons have become sneakily one of my favorite teams to watch now.
Yeah. And that's a big win over Houston. Knocks them down 2 times in a row here. And with Houston, we've been praising Jalen Green. He's been on a heater. Not last night, 2 of 8 shooting from the 3-point line, 8 of 21, 19 points. And he is, in a lot of ways, making himself into the bellwether for the Rockets. I think in the early part of the year, good, bad, a little bit of a roller coaster, but the team almost could have an identity aside of him. The way they've played in the month of January, it's almost like he's taken up such a big part of the personality of the team that when he has an off night like that, then they're going to struggle. So I'm very curious with Jalen Green to see what kind of consistency he finds. The last thing I'll ask you, we've talked a lot about Ausar Thompson. We both love him. I mean, two-way player that has all this stuff. His brother, Ausar Thompson, 11 points, 9 rebounds. Obviously, they look the exact same. I think they defend very similarly. They rebound very similarly. They play in transition similarly. But the difference to me is I'm curious what you think Ausar Thompson's offensive development is going to be, because that's where they're so different. He's just not the ball handler creator. Even the feel of the game is just a little bit different. So what do you see in him?
Yeah, and look, man, it's rare that guys are going to add that level of creativity with their handle and just scoring polish. He can get better as an offensive player. He better. And I mean, obviously the number one area you point to both of these guys is extending their range. You've got to become a more complete offensive player by extending your range. They're both, I think, sub 20% from the 3-point line, and they rarely ever take them. To their credit, they're still really effective when people know they're not going to take it, and they still get to their spots. So that's how athletic they are. That's how quick they are. That's how tough they are. But I think, Ausar Thompson clearly, to me, higher ceiling offensively, unless something really changes with Ausar. And it's going to have to probably happen over the next 1 or 2 off seasons if he wants to close that gap. Because I think Ausar Thompson is already a guy, and he's doing it. He's producing on a nightly basis. I can't imagine how good he will be if he does become even a decent perimeter shooter, decent 3-point shooter at all. Right now, it's working out for him because he doesn't have to, and he's still able to get to his spots. If you really want to, though, change the narrative around you and take it up a level and climb one of those rungs in that ladder I always talk about in the league, the way you're perceived, you've got to have to add that, both of those guys. That's a major priority for them going forward.
You mentioned them as being one of the most fun teams, and it made me think, for me personally, and I'll give my list and then you could think of yours. Obviously, the Nuggets, I mean, I like them just because that's the team I cover, but I actually think the Nuggets over the last month or so have been Westbrook Jokic is just as fun as it gets in the NBA. Sacramento has been incredibly fun to watch right now. Houston, I've enjoyed quite a bit. You go to the other conference, Atlanta earlier on, I was really enjoying, maybe a little bit less more recently. Detroit might be the next one. Like, those are my teams right now that I have the most fun watching. So it's kind of surprising that not only is Detroit good, but they're kind of one of the most joyful watches at the moment. Where do they make your top 5, maybe just unofficial top 5 of at this moment?
Right now they are, for the reasons you said. And also, look, selfishly, when you kind of identify something early and you kind of feel like you're ahead of the curve in looking at a player or a team right?
Yeah.
You just kind of innately root for that team. And so now, and I, based on just one preseason game, I had a good feeling about them. It far surpassed even what I thought to this point. So so now because of that too, watching them every night, you're like, man, I remember seeing these guys back in October, and now here they are, we're mid-January and they're over 500. So yes, they're in that category. I also think for me, I talk about them frequently, particularly now that Halliburton has been more consistent. Indiana's that for me too. I really think that's a fun team to watch.
Yeah, Indiana for sure. And honestly, the Cavs to me are super fun to watch. It's almost the Cavs have almost now gotten so good where they're a boring watch because I just pencil them in for wins. They're playing a mediocre team.
And
you're like,
I'll say something
points.
else, Adam. We talked about it at the time, and I'm going to repeat it now because nothing's changed my mind here in the last couple of weeks. The level of basketball played in the first Cleveland-Oklahoma City game was as high a level of basketball as you can watch. And so it gets you, your adrenaline thinking about what that would be if they ended up, in a 7-game series. The second one was very good too. That first one was damn near perfect offensive basketball. It really was. And so you and I have talked about that. Like, hey, they're done for the year. They won't see each other again. Maybe that's a good thing because it could be suspense if they end up holding on to the 1 seeds and somehow they're able to get to the finals. Like how good that would be. And I'm sorry for people that aren't, super hardcore NBA fans, and that might not interest you because there's not the splashy names on the front or the back of the jersey. If that's how you think, I'm sorry you feel that way, because if you love hoops, that was as good as I've seen all year. And I don't know that I'm going to see anything the rest of the year that's going to change my mind. That's the bar for me, that particular game.
Well, the last game I want to talk about now, the Grizzlies and the Timberwolves. Grizzlies get the win 108-106. Wolves had a chance to win it late. I know you want to talk about the very end of this game because that was, the Wolves had an opportunity here and it was as bad as it could have gone. So what stood out to you, and do you want to break down that moment?
Well, here's the thing, man. And I don't want to misspeak, so let me go to the exact time. Taking it out of bounds, 5 seconds. 5 seconds left in the game. Minnesota has the ball. Minnesota has the ball, down 2, taking the ball out at half court. And by design, you run Anthony Edwards off a screen at the top of the key into a dead sprint into the backcourt and throw him the ball roughly the 3-point line in the backcourt with 5 seconds to go. And that's what I got news for you. Every single person that watches the NBA on the planet would have predicted, well, this is going to be a step back 3-point shot. because number one, Anthony Edwards, one thing about Anthony Edwards, he has so much belief in himself. You're not even expecting he's going to make a pass in that situation. So knowing that he's going to shoot the ball, you run a play in which he catches the ball 71 feet, something like that, from the rim. And as soon as he got ahead of steam coming over half court, now Memphis runs a second guy toward him. And now you've eliminated even the time, that extra 2 seconds that it took to do all that. That could have been a ball screen where maybe it does lead to a slip for somebody down the lane. You're only down 2. You don't need a 3. Or maybe it leads to, a miscommunication on a switch, or he turns the corner, or there's a blitz and he kicks it back to Naz Reid for a 3. Like whatever it may be. And there was a game earlier this year, not 2 weeks ago. Anthony Edwards had an opportunity at the end of the game where he rises up to take a very tough 3-point shot with like a second and a half, 2 seconds to go. And Naz Reid is 10 feet away from him on the right wing, wide open. And it never crossed his mind. Like, I'm going back there. So look, listen, part of that is his mentality. It's a warrior mentality. I have the responsibility to do this. I get that. But we all know throughout time, those guys in those moments, sometimes it requires you making a play for somebody else. And I know that media that doesn't know what they're talking about are going to beat them up for that. Whatever. You got to be smart enough to understand. People that know what they're talking about to do this for a living are going to laud that decision and trust, especially if it's a guy that you're giving the ball in his wheelhouse. Like I remember LeBron made a play years ago in the finals. He kicked out to Kyle Korver in the wing for an open three in a situation late in the game when the lane was loaded up on him and he made the play. Oh, LeBron didn't want to shoot it. Hey, he ran away from the moment. It's like, come on, man. Just like when Jordan trusted Paxson and Kerr to make big shots to win championships. That's what they're out there to do. And Anthony Edwards in this situation, I'm not even saying that happened. And I think the reason, because they took half of the time out of his hands by where he caught the ball. So now you didn't have a choice. It was going to be a step back three. And of course it was. Going to his right, by the way, which isn't even his strong
That's
shot.
So hard,
his strong shot is a step back three going left. He had it on the right side of the court, and he shot an air ball at the buzzer, and you lose by 2. So I just thought the lack of creativity, and it doesn't take much to design something to get the ball inbounded in the front court, even if it's not to him, something where someone else catches it as a pressure release and an Anthony Edwards is coming off the hip, or he's getting a screen as the next pass, coming off a down screen, like something like that, where he has the option to turn the corner, get to the rim with that athletic ability. So that's really all I want to do was rant on that last play. I just thought that was horrible execution and horrible design in that moment to force a guy to go basically the length of the court with 5 seconds when you had the ball at half court to begin with. The whole point of the rule is to give you a chance to inbound the ball in your scoring area instead of running all the way into the backcourt just because that's the easy place to get it in.
So here's the big story from this game outside of that last play and then, of course, losing. The Donte DiVincenzo is out indefinitely, according to Shams Charania, with a left big toe injury. He's going to receive additional medical opinions, and he's in a boot at the moment. And it sounds like, I believe after the game, Finch used the word procedure, like we'll see what kind of procedure or something like that. You look at that and go, man, this could be scary for them because they're already shorthanded on guys that can play the perimeter, two-way perimeter guys. So this could be very concerning for a team that has already had a shaky year, 22-21, almost right at 500. But if there's a silver lining to it, I actually think there is a silver lining to it. They made a huge investment in Rob Dillingham. They made a huge investment because they believed what they're going to play with the, Gobert and have a little bit of the spacing, that you were going to need somebody that can create off of the bounce. And Dillingham is just such a fun player. I secretly want him to be great because he reminds me of a mini Kyrie who he just has so many different skills. His touch is insane. He had a crazy running hook shot contested that just looked like it was absolutely perfect. I kind of love this kid. And part of me goes, they're at a crossroads. Last night, Randle, 5 points. He did have 11 rebounds, 7 assists, but 2 of 13 shooting, 0 of 7 from 3. They don't have spacing. They don't have creation that makes sense. Dillingham is a Hail Mary because he's so tiny and he's a rookie. But the guy is, to me, I don't see a path to the Wolves being relevant this year without Dillingham hitting. And the odds are they won't be irrelevant either way. But if you go that route, at least you have a foundation in place for the coming years. So to me, there could be a blessing in disguise here if Dillingham is now forced to be a major piece of this team.
Yeah, I agree with that. Everything you just said. And I really liked that acquisition draft night. And I thought he's NBA ready. The league is built for guys like Dillingham now, the way it's set up with all of the space and all of the high ball screen action. And he's very quick and he's a very good shooter off the dribble. And so the league is just built for a guy like that now, more so than I think when there was more of a grinded out league for a smaller guy like that without as many threes being taken. It was going to be harder for him. He's got a situation that's set up for him to succeed. And I think that could be the blessing in disguise. This is a tough break for DiVincenzo because he had such a slow start for them. And we've talked about it a lot as to why, just different fit, different rhythm, not playing. He was a toast of the town in New York. And now he's in Minnesota and it's a good team, but it's a totally different role and touches are different. He's not playing next to one of his best buds in Brunson, who has all this faith in him. Tibbs, the Garden, he became a Garden favorite. Like that's a tough adjustment, man. And here these Nova guys are still there. Still got 3 Nova guys there, and you're not there anymore. Like it was a lot. So I got it mentally. He snapped out of that. He had 14 out of his last 16 games in double figures, and he's been starting for the last 8-9 games. Yeah. He totally found not at that level because he'll probably never get that level again, just in terms of his minutes, his shots, the freedom that he had at the end of the year in New York. That's as good as it'll ever get for him. But he absolutely found that rhythm again. Now they're going to miss that. For sure. Dillingham can help offset some of that offensively, but where they're going to miss him, I think the most for however long he's out, and it doesn't sound good anytime you start talking about indefinite amount of time. That's a terrible thing to hear. They're going to miss his size and competitiveness defensively. And like the hustle plays he makes with long rebounds and diving on balls and just an incredible amount of energy and bounce that he plays with. And again, in a short period of time, especially now that he got hot in Minnesota, and I just did a game there, he's one of the crowd favorites there now because people relate to that level of effort. They just do, man. You relate to it. And so they're going to miss that stuff, the intangible winning plays that DiVincenzo makes. But at least some of that scoring load potentially could be offset if Dillingham he plays well, and he did last night. And he just came back. And I remember when I talked to Chris Finch about this last week, he was very excited that Dillingham was coming back soon. He said it could have been any day. He was in his second G League game that night of the Minnesota Golden State game. And now here he is. And he comes in, and it doesn't take him long, man. 17 minutes, 6 for 8, 15 points.
Plus 16.
Plus 16. And a plus 16 in 17 minutes.
Yeah. He's an interesting player, and I just hope we see him. And I think that, again, I just don't buy. It's not even that I don't buy. I feel certain about this. The Wolves are not going anywhere with this roster as currently constructed. So your choices are try to squeeze the most out of it and just ride it however far it takes you, or try to start building towards something that you can. And if you do that, we're halfway through the season and we're making some proclamations. They got to get rid of Julius Randle. I know he just does not fit there. All of these problems you have, if you took him out and just replaced him, even last night, you replaced him with Naz Reid. Naz Reid goes 5 of 10 from 3, has 29 points. He was very good. But Randle, some of this is on him. Body language, terrible, stormed out, didn't talk to media the other day after a game. Like, he has these moments. Clearly, he is not bought into the culture of the team and what have you. But even talent-wise, he just doesn't fit what they're trying to do. The problem is, where do you go? I saw somebody say, Sam Vecini, I know yesterday, talked about Jordan Poole. Like, you have to start to look at desperate teams because you're giving somebody Randle, they're going to lose. So you need a team that's trying to lose. Washington will do that. Poole brings in some shooting. I don't know if I love it, but to me, hell or high water, you have to find a way to move Julius Randle if you want anything to happen for your team this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree that I've seen enough of this. Yeah. It's not a great fit. It's unfortunate for Julius Randle and the Wolves. Like they gambled on something. It's worked out pretty well for the Knicks, I believe. It hasn't worked out that well for Minnesota. Julius Randle's a talented player. And look, one day we're going to have to sit down and go over the whole league. And for once, instead of, taking the approach, Randle doesn't fit, get rid of Randle.
Oh, no.
Let's figure out where would Julius Randle thrive? Let's figure that out.
Washington, he'd put up 30 and 10.
That doesn't sound like you're sending him somewhere to thrive. It sounds like you're sending him to an organization that virtually any player in the league you could say belongs in Washington. And so I don't think that's like, a deep dive in Julius Randle's offensive game and how it'll fit into that system. That's just more you wanting to see Minnesota with other players. And Washington's got nothing to lose.
He'll accomplish all of your goals. He 30 and 10, maybe he gets a little more trade value going into his last year of his deal, and you're going to lose every game. So I think that's why that's where he would go. Lastly, though, before we get out of here, there's one guy. I told you I had a hot take that I wanted to get to, and we just talked about the losing team for a long time. We didn't even mention the Memphis Grizzlies, who, by the way, big win for them as well, 28 and 15. They just keep winning. The guy I wanted to make a proclamation about was Jaren Jackson Jr., 24 and 11. He is just not talked about at the level of player that he actually is. The guy gives buckets to tough defenses. He gives buckets to, when everybody knows that the option is to go to him, and he just drives and does these awkward little things to get his points. 9 of 18, 24 points, plus 24 in this one. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is a level above his reputation. And it just kind of flabbergasts me that nobody really talks about him. Do you agree with this, that Jaren Jackson, he's been their best player this year, and I just think he's the biggest reason they're at 28 wins at this point, despite all the injuries.
I totally agree. And I actually said on our show, 2 weeks ago, and I got some flack for it in our chat, that Memphis right now is third in the West. And, let's say they end up there as you go into the deadline to pick all-star reserves. And I said, If
You're
you're
right.
taking one guy from Memphis, I'm taking him. I'm taking him. And oh, you're crazy. And I'm going, no, not really. If you look at John Morant, it's close. Don't get me wrong, it's close. And John Morant's the point guard. I understand there's a level of responsibility that comes with that. But Jaren Jackson Jr., what he does on a nightly basis to morph into whatever it takes to win that night, if you need him to step out and be a perimeter shooter, if that's what it takes, he'll go out and he'll make 4 or 5 threes. If you need him to be a back to the basket post player, offensively, like he did last night in one of the biggest moments of the game, he just went into the block and absolutely worked Julius Randle and got this little jump hook to go. That was a really critical part of the game. Or guess what? The other part, he can win a game defensively.
Yep.
He's that good defensively.
Player, man.
So like the guy does everything. I completely agree. He's got a weird, quirky game. He's got an ugly shot, but it goes in from the perimeter. He's got this game. Very few guys his size have a game where they give you that much head and shoulders off the dribble when he's coming at you. He loves to back you down to the post and spin off. He can go either hand equally well in the lane to shoot it. I'm a big Jaren Jackson Jr. fan, and I think that you're right. He deserves a little bit more credit for what this team does. But he's so quiet the way he goes about everything. Doesn't draw a lot of attention to himself. Just shows up, does his job. But he's so versatile, and he wins in so many different ways. That's why I respect him so much.
So I didn't prep you for this one, but the Rockets and Grizzlies are basically tied to the standings. Rockets technically a half a game ahead of them. If you had to pick one of those teams to maintain that position and the other one to fall to outside the top 4, which one would you pick to stay, to maintain?
Man, between Houston and Memphis?
Yep.
Man, that's a
Really
tough one. I would probably pick Houston.
Okay.
But not by much. That's honestly 6-1, half dozen the other. That's a coin toss question. I just think Houston's overall consistency and Memphis feels like Memphis deals with injuries more than most teams. So you feel like there's
you can't count. Yeah, you can't say they're going to get healthy
for them. There's more coming for them. It just feels that way. And so I probably would lean Houston, but that's a toss up. Then of course you got Denver right there in the mix as well. So that's going to be an interesting battle all year, 2 through 4.
I agree, man, because you have Dallas, if they get healthy, can obviously go on a run. To me, the Clippers look good, although another all-NBA curse. We go deep on the Clippers yesterday, and they come out and get blown out last night at home. So you got Clippers, Denver, and Dallas, all of those teams, and who knows, maybe Sacramento if they can keep this going. I mean, I'm not going to cut them short. Those teams will push the Grizzlies and Rockets to hold that spot, and we'll see what happens.
You think the league, Adam, should just the way this looks like it's going to play out, like just I know you got the play in, and then you got your 4 series in the West. Just go ahead and just schedule a 7-game series with Golden State and Phoenix. Just for totally outside of the NBA playoffs, just to give us some Durant and Curry. Because most people see, and maybe throw Wemby in there, you have another team, a 4-team tournament that has nothing to do with the NBA playoffs so that people can watch some of these guys. Well, look, obviously they all have a chance. It's very tight for that play in. All 3 of those teams could end up. You never know.
Yeah. Who knows? My camera clearly doesn't want me to answer. Oh, there we go. Now I'm back. What do you know? All right, let's get out of here. We have one super chat that I know came in. Let's, what was that one on? Psycho Blue, our guy, first team all chat. B-Ball Cthulhu just wants to know how Monty Williams is doing. Man, he threw us $20 to throw Monty Williams under the bus.
And guess what? I have the answer for that. You want to know? Yeah. I'm going to update people. Let me tell you about Monty Williams. First of all, obviously, took $60+ million to walk away from the Pistons, and nobody wants to get fired. But if you're going to get fired, you might as well take $60 million with you. So he did that. But you know where Monty Williams is right now? He is in San Antonio, Texas. And he is coaching his son Elijah in high school. Yeah, he's the head coach at a high school in San Antonio. And Elijah, by the way, I think is the 18th ranked player in the country in his class of 2026. So he's a big-time player. And Monty Williams, who we all know has gone through personal tragedy, lost his wife in a horrific head-on collision. 3 other kids in the car that day. Fortunately, all of them okay. But he did lose his wife in that tragedy. So if this guy's you want to pay somebody to not work, that's your decision as an organization. But he is in a place where I think is probably very mentally healthy for him, coaching his son, spending family time, and has a $65 million more in his bank account than he did prior to that. So I think Monty Williams is doing okay. Will Monty Williams ever coach again in the NBA? That remains to be seen. He's probably going to see this out with his son in high school, I would imagine. And then maybe, who knows, maybe he ends up back on somebody's bench in the NBA.
Well, there you go. Cue that outro music for us, James. We appreciate you guys hanging with us. Looks like we're going to have Kevin O'Connor later in the week, and I have a big guest coming up on either Thursday or Wednesday this week that I think you guys will be pretty excited to hear about. Talking about somebody very close, and talking about Jokic, talking about Paolo Banchero. We'll see if that comes through for us. Legs, you're off. You're calling a game tomorrow, right?
I'm not. I'm in D.C. with Van Pelt actually tomorrow doing some post-game. I haven't been in studio with SVP, but I got news for you. I already told those guys in D.C., if we don't get to the NBA because we talk all Commanders, I'm cool with that too.
Tune in to hear more about the Commanders. Hey, you have to tell them your comp for Jaden Daniels. I want to hear what Scott Van Pelt says when you say, he reminds me of Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson combined.
I might go in there actually and tell them I want that to be part of my segment now that you mentioned it.
There you go, man. I can't wait to see it. Everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe here on YouTube and hit that like button for us on the way out. We'll see you.
Y'all silly like the mayor.